But there are some sayings that are just really inscrutable. Look at saying 7. Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion that the human being will devour, so that the lion becomes human. And cursed is the human being that the lion devours, and the lion will become human." What does that mean? I have no clue.
With the lion, it represents the lower nature of man. So naturally, blessed is the man who consumes the lion, because the lower nature becomes the man. And cursed is the man the lower nature the lion consumes, because he'll just express the lower nature. He'll become the ravenous beast who can't fulfill the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit are human desires. They can't fulfill them, so they seek around. And of course, who is the enemy? The enemy is like a roaring lion, looking for who he can devour. Can the enemy only devour a man if he's in his lower nature? And this is the symbology it's speaking of. Hey guys, it's a Sunday morning where I am, and it's a very, very cold day, so I don't think I'll be out here too long. Years ago I saw a talk by a Yale University professor, and I lost it. I could never find it again, and by the powers that be, it landed back in my lap. And it opens up in a perfect topic about reading spiritual texts purely literal, because when you read them purely literal, you don't physically know what is going on. Now, what I mean by that is you're reading a literal story, and many times the application of that story into a person's life is just totally beyond them. They have no ability to apply it into their everyday life. Now, this professor, whose name I do not have, was, and nothing against him, we need academics. We have to have them. Our world is a better place for having academia. However, there comes a point where we have to be mature, and that's where academia has a problem. Academia can rob maturity from people, especially when it comes to spiritual and scriptural texts. And the reason being is, academia for many people is about building up a carnal mind and an intellect. And the more you build that up, the more you are taken away from where those books point you toward. The theology, the scholarship, takes you away from the present moment, because you're in an education system which is faulty and tells you, come this way, and you're on a straight line journey, and never tells you how to enjoy and experience the moments within that straight line journey, how to feel the most from it. And in that present moment and feeling the most from it is where you commune with God. That is where you have your experiences. It's only when I started doing that God guided me, and my guidance was 11:11, and I received feathers as well. There are many people who receive these things. I referenced to someone the other day that I was watching a pastor at the Bethel church speak, and a white feather came down during his talk where he said he gets a lot of white feathers, and he referenced Psalms, I will cover you with my feathers. So true. I get these signs from God, but if you're not present-minded, it doesn't happen. Fritzi often isn't as present-minded as I am. She's 10 years younger than me and less practiced. That's okay. But I will see synchronicities where she does not. She still sees them. Yesterday we had a big event, and she received 2 11:11s off the back immediately afterwards. Off the back of, there was a receipt worth 11:11 that she happened to check, then she looked at her clock and it was 11:11 at night. But sometimes we'll walk down the street and I'll get a sign, or signs will come, and Fritzi doesn't see them because she's not as present-minded as I am. And I find it very difficult to spend time with people who are not present-minded due to that, because that is where the contentment of life dwell. People who are thinking too much always suffer. And there's only one solution to it. It's not to rewire the way you think to make it tolerable. It's to stop thinking and live in the now. Because the story of you is not important in the realms of the galactic endlessness that is reality. And thus, if you've got this chatter in your brain which is malfunctioning and making you sad and etc., best thing to do is to eliminate the chatter and just come to the present moment. Because even if you try to get the chatter to be something more tolerable, it's always going to be broken. Because the natural state of a human being is a quaking mess. And I feel that too much academia leads you away from a solution to the fact that that quaking mess is there. Now, this Yale professor, I'm going to give one example. He was speaking about the Gospel of Thomas. Now, the Gospel of Thomas are the spoken words of Jesus Christ. They are written by Thomas as the spoken word. Many uneducated persons say that they are whatever, heretical, fake. They're not. If you go to the best scholars on the planet, then you'll see that they were written at the same time. And of course, an awakened person could only speak in the way that this text is speaking. And that tells me that it was Yeshua, or at least his disciples, who passed this down. Because a truly awakened soul, which Jesus Christ was, when he became Christ Jesus, is able to interpret and write such things because they understand, as the other Bibles tell you, the dark sayings of old, and they speak in parable, and these things are an allegory. An awakened mind can spot that. An academic mind often doesn't, but can, and thus these things become lost on many people. I'm not saying all academics can't interpret it. Now, I'll give you one saying, and it's a beautiful saying.
But there are some sayings that are just really inscrutable. Look at saying 7. Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion that the human being will devour, so that the lion becomes human. And cursed is the human being that the lion devours, and the lion will become human." What does that mean? I have no clue.
And it says, "Cursed is the man that the lion consumes, because he will surely become the lion. And blessed is the man who consumes the lion, for the lion will surely become man." And this professor, upon saying that, says, what on earth does that mean? He hasn't got any idea, and he's teaching in university theology. Now, I say that as humbly as I can, and I feel I have that ability because I haven't spent too much time in theology and academia. Academia teaches you that you find truth externally, and you can find a truth externally, but it's rare by learning external truths that they add up to the truth, and the truth is a knowledge of self. Now, woe to the lawgivers, for they take away the keys to the kingdom, for they do not enter within. I've spent so much time inside myself that I have begun to understand the keys to the kingdom. And those who don't spend time inside themselves, they externalize it constantly. So they literalize spiritual texts, which was supposed to be about an internal journey. And it doesn't mean that there's not a balance of literal and spiritually esoteric going on. Esoteric, people are so scared of that word. It simply is inward or outward. Now, with the lion, it represents the lower nature of man. So naturally, blessed is the man who consumes the lion, because the lower nature becomes the man. And cursed is the man the lower nature the lion consumes, because he'll just express the lower nature. He'll become the ravenous beast who can't fulfill the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit are human desires. They can't fulfill them, so they seek around. And of course, who is the enemy? The enemy is like a roaring lion, looking for who he can devour. Can the enemy only devour a man if he's in his lower nature? And this is the symbology it's speaking of. Now, Samson, he tackled a lion, famously in the Bible, and he won, and he did hand-to-hand combat. Inside the Bible at the end, which I've covered before, was honey. Honey is always representing the bioelectric energy of the human body, which was represented by the bronze serpent on Moses' staff, being nurtured and kept into the heavens of the body, the higher elements of the energy centers of the body. If you spend that energy on riotous living, on overindulging in sexual immorality and overeating and lying, anger, things of this nature, you spend that energy in a bad way. You don't nurture it. And thus you become the serpents that are biting those who need to be saved in the desert with Moses. When that energy reaches the top, the ancients say it activates a gland, and that's where the Holy Spirit unites with you. So many people do this and don't know the mechanics. You don't have to know how a carburetor works in your engine to drive a car. Thus, you don't have to know how to let the Holy Spirit envelop you and to talk to God. You can do that without knowing about the mechanics of your body, but that is the mechanics. And Dionysus also had a pine cone that dripped with honey. It's the same representation of that gland and basically representing the unity with God through it. Now, as with anything, a gun can be used, for instance, let's say fire. Fire can be used to cook anything. You can look at it this way. Fire can be used to cook a meal for your children, can also burn them. The fire is not evil. The problem we have on the planet is people think that the use of these things is evil because some persons have been associated with evil toward the use of that. Because, as we are told, there is indeed two spiritual forces, and presumably because they live in a realm beyond ours, you must go up to an elevated state. And the Bible warns you of this. If a child asks for bread, is God going to give him a serpent, or however it's spoken? If you're seeking God in doing those things, he's not going to hurt you by giving you demons when you're seeking with a pure Christed heart. But if you come looking for an experience and you're just sinning all day long and sexually immoral, you better be careful what you're going to find when you do these things. You better be careful when you fast in that and you've done nothing but think of evil things and whatever, you've sinned a lot, rape and all this monstrous stuff. And then you go into trying to access a spiritual realm, you're going to get horrifically uncomfortable as those demons start wrestling with you. And I've seen this in people who say, fasting nearly killed me after just 2 or 3 days, which is impossible. It's not. It's because their demons are coming up and their demons are making them think everything but to continue fasting because they don't want to be left. And these kind cometh out except through prayer and fasting. Now, the lion, I've covered a video about this as well, but just one other text that I like to reference is the second book of Adam and Eve, a stunning book, so beautiful. And I wish that it hadn't been left out by the Romans from the Bible. In that book, Adam and Eve come to a cave. And to go into a cave is to enter within. It's to not take away the keys to the kingdom. As I said, woe to the lawgivers, they take away the keys to the kingdom, they don't enter within. The cave represents going into that natural space within you and going inside to seek the keys to the kingdom. But when they get there are 2 ravenous lions standing guard, and God speaks to them and says, why did you move from the east to the west? He's saying, why did you go from the promised land in the east, the right hand of God? Why did you do that and go back to the other path, the left hand path? And the left hand path is that of the indulgence of the flesh. It's that of the indulgence of frivolously spilling your life force with sex, etc., constantly, instead of nurturing it and having temperance and an element of stoic nature to yourself and discipline. And he says to Adam and Eve, why? But before that, there are 2 snarling beasts stopping them from entering the cave. Even Adam and Eve had a snarling ego, a lower nature, stopping them from going within to be with God. And God tells them, you've gone from what mysticism states, the right, the east, is the promised land of God, the use of the brain in the right spiritual way. And you've gone back to the left. Why have you done it? And these snarling beasts are the answer, because they haven't dealt with the lower nature of themselves. This Yale University professor has no idea about it because he hasn't got the lower nature in mind when he looks upon these texts. Now, I'm thinking I might do a series interpreting the Gospel of Thomas, because I'm starting to feel more energy. I feel I can speak of God better, because I didn't want to do a disservice. I didn't want people saying, look at this guy, he's talking all about God with this message few people have, and he's sick. Why is that? Well, I deem it I was under attack But I also know God threw it into a way where I learned a lot of lessons about myself through this. So I'm still grateful, even though the sickness has been horrible, I've had that. Because it pushed me into my lower nature. And instead of suppressing things using the tools I would have, at the moment I can't fast without getting very sick because of all the problems in my body. And thus it allowed me to sit alone with the lion inside me and start a fight with that lion, which has gone on all my life, but in the last years has intensified. And if it weren't for being pushed into there, it wouldn't happen. And I've had to sit still with that lion and deal with it and find out exactly where it's got its hooks in me. And you need to too, because the problems of the planet exist only in the expression of the lower nature of man. People have evil regimes, humans are doing that. People are deceived into evil regimes, humans are doing that. People believe when humans alter texts and include warmongering, etc. Someone spoke with me about this yesterday, sent me a nice message about this in the Quran yesterday, that is the loving word of a loving God, that they want you to kill, etc. It's not. But if you dwell in your lower nature, you're not going to get it. You're going to believe it. You're absolutely going to believe it. So, with people who are academic, we need them. I'm grateful that there are people who did this, and for instance recently managed to give beautiful surgery to my son and he's fine off it. You need academics. I am not bashing it, but there comes a time where academics need people like me. They need people because we need a variance of persons. They need people who have done the other work that they have not had chance to do because they've been in a linear life system. They've been told, you're going here, you're going here, you're going here. And by the time they get to an age of 35 to 40, which is psychology I'm speaking now, they've created routine and habits in their body, and they become almost automated human beings, and the misery tends to kick in at that point. Whereas if, instead of becoming automated human beings, they were taught, at least in among the academics, take a day every week to learn how to enjoy the music that is life instead of trying to get to some point in the song, to steal the metaphor that Alan Watts used. Hello. 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 Someone's dog here. Hi. Hello. Hello. Oh, beautiful. Hello. Go on. Go on. Cheers. Random someone's dog passing through the woods with him and giving me a lot of attention. Being taught how to enjoy the music, to tune into the present moment. And in doing that, you begin to identify who you truly are. And who you truly are in your core is a quaking mess. And whether that's natural or not, it can be improved upon, because I'm evidence to that. The quaking mess controlled most of my life, and I was so habituated in my sins, in my addictions, in my demons, that I couldn't break free from it. But then when I started trying to have temperance and discipline, I did transform. And it was God's grace that transformed me, but it was me coming to the identification of my lower nature that started that process, because before that there was no space for God. Because there was too much worldly desire. And I think that is the fine line we walk. You can have a good-hearted academic, but they are looking at externalizing, they are looking at the world. And I've seen some of the greatest, one of the greatest Gnostic academics, theologians on the planet is an atheist. Because he's looked at the books, he's looked and looked and looked, and he's never applied it. He's never gone off on his own. He's never gone and sat in nature. Because when you sit in nature, you find the divine within. And when you find the divine within, there's no greater contentment. And you can spot people who have found it or not, because they lack faith. They have words, but they don't have faith to back it. And this is what I find in my own life. Often with people who are seeking or on the path, good persons, they don't know that the lion is there. And because they don't know the lion's there, every single week they get beat by this lion, because they don't know what weapons and tools they should arm themselves with to overthrow it. And the reason being is, even in Yale, one of the most profound education systems in the world, they don't know what they're talking about. And someone like me is needed in there, because you can't teach spiritual matters by only looking at things in a literal sense, or they make no sense whatsoever. Nobody can tell me that saying I've used, one saying of many, makes any sense. Cursed is the man that the lion consumes, he becomes a lion. Is it literal? Okay, you just become lion poop. And blessed is the man who consumes the lion. Who eats lions? It's obviously not literal. It's metaphor. Blessed is the man who overcomes his lower nature, for his lower nature will become the higher ideals of the man. That's all. If anyone knows that professor, send him this video. No bashing him or anything. I'm just saying I've lived a life different to he, and because I've lived a life different to he, I can understand things of a spiritual nature that spiritual persons in my position of consciousness wrote. God bless, guys.